Thank you, Bethel. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. You had coffee. We need to see the energy. Yesterday was the celebration for Adoa, right? So Dawit said we should have that same energy, isn't it? All right. So I will be the moderator for the next session. My name's Michuki Mwangi. I'm the Senior Director for Internet Technology and Development at the Internet Society. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And before we get started, I will first like to invite a good friend of mine. His name is Dr. Christian Bope. He's the chairman of AFRINIC, the AFRINIC board. And I've known Bope for many years, so I struggle on how to introduce him because I've known him when he was a member of the technical community in DRC, working with the community there to set up the Internet Exchange Point with the ISP Association. He's done some more work with respect to not only with AFRINIC, but also he set up a company in DRC. He's also been an instructor at AFNOG, the Africa Network Operators Group, where we teach capacity building to upcoming engineers and so on. But what I know him for mostly is his energy to actually get things moving. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite Bope to just give us his opening remarks.
Okay, good morning. I wish I would know how to say good morning in Amharic, but next time I will. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be in Ethiopia amidst the interchange happening at the moment. I'm happy to see, Okay. I'm happy to see this happening and hope that the development will be enjoyed across the country with the growth of the internet penetration, connectivity, and use. As you are aware, although Ethiopia has more than 105 million people, only less than 15% have access to the internet. In real number, almost 90 million people in the country do not have access to the internet. This is a worry situation in a network information society and highly globalized and globalizing world. Nonetheless, the pace of development means the country is catching up with the rest of the world. I'm sure we will see the steady and sharp increase of not only internet connectivity, but also use across the country for the benefit of people, the government, and the economy. We cannot afford to leave anyone behind. We need to work together to grow internet and ensure it is used in a meaningful and relevant to the Ethiopian and to the African as a whole. Let me also remind you, AFRINIC vision is to be the leading force in growing the internet for Africa's sustainable development. This important instrument gives us the opportunity, but also the obligation to serve the African continent to grow the internet for Africa development. There is a call for all of us to be actively, effectively, and efficiently serve you to be part of the internet development in the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have worked hard to deliver on this mandate. We have focused on important issues like digital economy, cybersecurity, and internet growth, and internet government as well. They are important not only to us, but to the African community, who are increasingly being part of the global economy through the intense use of the internet and technology. We are experiencing monumental change because of the technology and the internet-driven globalization, where networking and information are vital actors. We at AFRINIC are playing our parts to ensure this happening through our professional and efficient management of internet number resources and our support for and usage and development. AFRINIC is a membership-based organization, meaning organization and key drivers of the internet in the African country must apply to be members. Through that membership, they get the resources they require to provide sustainable, resilient internet. We like to grow our membership in Ethiopia because we believe this resource belongs to all of us. If Ethiopia is not benefiting from its fair share of these resources, then we are not being fair to the people of Ethiopia. We encourage you to apply and get these resources. I note that one of the objectives of this conference is to create awareness among policymakers, regulators, business, technologists, and potential entrepreneurs and about internet model, technology, and organization, and create the foundation for a robust internet ecosystem in Ethiopia, in this new post-monopoly area. The meeting also seeks to explore the potential and the future obstacle threats regarding the internet technology expansion in the country and discuss potential solutions and recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, they are close to the heart of AFRINIC. This issue for AFRINIC is very, very important for us. This issue be addressed here in Ethiopia and all over the Africa. As I mentioned earlier on, we are keenly interested in working together to expand reach, to enhance penetration, to ensure every African has internet that works. We are working and committed to ensure no one is left behind in our drive to ensure our vision states our leading force in growing the internet for Africa's sustainable development. But we cannot be a leading force without you, without your support and without your involvement in taking up the opportunity, but also dealing with the current challenge and threats. Thank you for inviting AFRINIC in this meeting. And I promise that we at AFRINIC are keen to work with all of you to build the foundation for a robust internet ecosystem in Ethiopia in post-monopoly era. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bope. So next, we'll now go into the main session, which is looking at, we have two keynotes. And actually, sorry, I wanted to say something before I go into that. And thank you for those remarks, Bope. I think it's important to highlight the need for Ethiopia to actually get its resources. We're hoping that at the end of this, part of this is that it will open up the market in terms of the awareness that will be created so that we have more networks actually asking for resources from AFRINIC. And one thing I am envious of Ethiopia, and I'll say this, one thing, I'm a techie, so my background has a bit of that. Many countries have the inherent legacy of IPv4. I feel like Ethiopia is starting from that clean slate and has the opportunity to just take up IPv6 and run with it. All the networks that they will build can actually come straight up with IPv6. And that will make them a leader compared to the other countries in the region that are actually struggling to share off the IP dependence on IPv4. So that's one thing I wanted to add. So moving on to the next session, because we are running behind time. We have two panelists, and I'm going to invite Dawit to come and moderate those two panelists on a title called An Exciting Past and a Thrilling Future of the Internet. Thank you, Dawit.
Thank you. I would like to call upon Professor Ndemo to come here, and Andrew Sullivan from Internet Society. while waiting for them to come, I would like to say a few words about IPv6 as well. In fact, during the coffee break, we were talking with Dr. Abiot from the ministry, and I introduced him to Christian from chair of AFRINIC, and there's already something cooking, and I hope that AFRINIC will help Ethiopia developing its IPv6 strategy so that when the new operators will be coming, they will start right from using IPv6 and not IPv4, and Ethio Telecom as well will change to, will move to IPv6 quickly. So the next session is really very important because, you know, to go forward, we have to see what has happened in the past. Andrew started talking about the internet, and he will continue his discussion. We didn't give him enough time during the opening. I think it's important to have that philosophy, why the internet is what it is today. It's not by chance. It is because of its philosophy, its architecture. And Andrew will continue the discussion. And Professor Ndemo, that I will introduce later, will tell us a little bit about what happened in Kenya. I remember not very long ago, maybe 12, 13 years ago, Kenya was not much better than Ethiopia. I remember that there wasn't even submarine cable arriving to Kenya, when in Ethiopia we had submarine cable coming through Sudan, even though we were landlocked. But Kenya took very bold measures, and very quickly they surpassed us. And I think it's important that we learn what they did. And there is no better person to tell us about it than Professor Ndemo. So I would like to introduce Professor Ndemo, if the internet works and I can have his bio. And it's my fault. I had it in front of me, but I clicked somewhere else. Okay, I have it now. So Professor Bitange Ndemo is Professor of Entrepreneurship and at the University of Nairobi Business School. His research center on the link between ICTs and small and medium enterprises, with emphasis on how ICTs influence economic development in Africa. Professor Ndemo is chairman of Kenya's Distributed Ledgers and Artificial Intelligence Task Force that is developing a roadmap of the country's digital transformation. He is an advisor and board member to several organizations, including Safaricom, one of the leading telecom company in Africa, OECD Expert Panel for Blockchain Foundation, Research ICT Africa, that is based in South Africa. Besides having been a permanent secretary of Kenya's Ministry of Information and Communication, where he was credited with facilitating many transformative ICT projects. He is a member of the Global Learning Council, a member of Global Blockchain Council, part of the World Economic Forum's Global Fourth Industrial Revolution Councils, a senior advisor to UN's Global Pulse Big Data Initiative, and the UN CDF's Better Than Cash Alliance. He's an open data, big data evangelist and dedicated to simplification, visualization of data for ordinary citizens to consume. He writes 2 columns every week for Business Daily and nation online. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Professor.
Good morning. I must say that I'm very happy to be with you. Okay. Okay. I am happy to join you, and I want to thank the organizers for asking me to come and share our experiences. I'm very lucky to be invited with a huge delegation from Kenya, and that delegation also played a huge role in bringing Kenya to where they are at the moment. And I'll probably mention their names because when I was appointed to government, lots of powers, I didn't know that we had many advocacy groups or pressure groups that used to meet the government from time to time and shape the policy direction. Their contribution, actually the secret to Kenya's success, is because we allowed several stakeholders to participate in the policy implementation. It is the most painful thing you can do as a civil servant, but you celebrate it a couple of years later because of the achievements that you attain from involving everybody with respect to the development of the economy. One of the people who developed, who were the developers of something called Keynote, and I think you need to check it online, is Alice Munywa, now in the US, working on open source. Alice Munywa, you can just say hello. And Victor Chalo, who also came to my position later. They look shy, but they are very tough when they are at home. And Michuki, who was here, Michuki, Mwangi Michuki. Where did he go? You can, the man with wisdom, you know, you can stand up. Yeah. And actually, there are many others. I say this because these are the people who actually made Kenya what it is. I just took the credit. And they put pressure. But the story began with Kenyans who were in the diaspora, mostly in the US and in England. They came back, and in 1993, they started saying there is something called internet. And after a couple of using, at the time we had an incumbent monopoly called Kenya Post and Telecommunications. And the moment they started using those lines to send, they were awfully slow, actually 16 kbps to do that. In fact, the best way to understand that, those of you who don't understand, because it's a bit old, that you can begin to send your mail and you go to cook and finish cooking before you can get your access line. And that's how slow it was. But they persevered and they pushed on. And when the government found out, they arrested some of them and they closed it and said, these were CIA agents who were sending information from the country. You realize the telcos then were actually a security infrastructure. So they blocked them completely. But then luckily, we had non-governmental organizations, the World Bank, which joined in to pressure Telecom Kenya to change. Eventually, they ceded and said they would do partial liberalization. But in 1995, they sort of allowed to give them leased line, 32 kbps, 64 kbps, very constraining, but nevertheless, that was a step forward. But by 1999, they decoupled the Kenya Post and Telecommunication into Postal Corporation, then Telecom Kenya, and an independent regulator. What happened from 2000 were a series of innovations. Even though the speeds were so low and the incumbent was charging so much money in order to deter them from using the systems. But slowly, even the private sector began to use this new thing that had come. Mobile also was growing. But again, these groups maintained pressure on government that we needed to unconstrain the systems so that people can begin to use. So around 2003, we began the pressure from these groups, forced the new government in 2003 to create a Ministry for Information and Communication. And that was very important because now they began to look seriously at policy arrangements. And they developed some policy document, but Kenyan politics is very cantankerous. In 2005, that team was moved out. And in 2005, we came into, I'm saying myself and my minister at the time, took over and looked at that policy, changed a few things, but we did something very key. Because we were consulting with the stakeholders, we summarized it in such a way that we had this very clear 5 policy objectives. The first one is that we build infrastructure so that we can provide super broadband. That time, broadband was 254 kbps. That was broadband. That was, I remember I used to own a cyber cafe at the 32 kbps and the 256, was it 256 or 254, something like that. You can do the mathematics. So infrastructure was very key. And then we thought we could develop local content, local applications, create employment, capacity build. And within this short period, by the way, even without government, the pressure groups built capacity within a very short period. Michuki was sent to Brazil to learn how to manage the exchange point within a very short time. And as you said, a very short time, we moved very fast. So one could move actually very fast if you worked with stakeholders to do that. And then we began to look at how we can, government itself, we created a policy on public-private partnerships. And because we had an initiative to build the undersea cable across Africa, we had failed with the first one, which was called Africa One. And then the second one was sponsored by the World Bank, because the entire Africa were using 1 gig through satellite. World Bank thought that if they put the cable, it will be a white elephant, nobody would use this. So they said, all of you must share this. But that process was very slow because some people didn't quite understand what the undersea cable was. So we discovered some came because of per diem and other things. And we said, no, we are not going to participate in this process. We need to bring a cable, and landed a cable in 2 years out of Fujairah in UAE. That changed everything. And this, I say, was our inspiration. Our argument was, if you see where this, this is Africa. And if you see where these cables are, there was much more knowledge. So we said there is a correlation between undersea cables and a lot of knowledge or a lot of enterprise. So if we did that to Africa, we could begin to see that. So this was our inspiration, and within a very short period, Africa had a deluge of fiber optics, a deluge. We have this. But then with NEPAD, we began to talk about the terrestrial fiber cable. And, oops. I may have forgotten that, whatever. But we wanted to have a terrestrial cable network from South Africa all the way to Central North Africa. But this is what we did in Kenya. We linked every part of Kenya. And if you see, we also linked Ethiopia. We also linked to Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. And then we met each country and said, we are not going to have a border. You get your broadband without any constraint. That actually changed a lot of neighboring countries. I think Ethiopia began also to use capacity from Mombasa. We began to plan the Nile cable, which was going to be a redundant solution, which was going to put Ethiopia right on the spot of this fiber optics. But then the government changed, and I think Victor forgot to discuss it further. So there is still an opportunity that we need to have a fiber on the Nile, and that would actually link, because sometimes those cables along the Indian Ocean, they get cut by the ships. So that is very key to us. And then after the cable landed, we gave incentives. And there's a lot of money for incentivizing the people to use. For example, we subsidized all universities and the research institutions to give them broadband, both public and private, because the beneficiaries we thought were Kenyans, and that worked very well. We gave young people laptops. We asked government to remove duties on broadband, to remove duties on devices. And this is what actually gave us the speed that we got onto that. We also began to develop the digital centers in the rural areas, then subsidize operators to provide last mile broadband, and also this was very key, Kenya Open Data Initiative. What used to happen is that these people forced me every evening on Fridays to go and speak to people like you and discuss what exactly do you want government to do. And we used to call it the fireside chats. And then some young people said, we need data, we need government data. Of course, back in my mind, I was thinking, this is impossible because government has a policy or a law on data that it can't be put outside the country. But then the president had begun to be very happy with what was happening. So when we went and asked him, could we get daily government data on schools, on health, on agriculture, and whatever? And he said, no problem. But we didn't have cloud services in Kenya. So the next step, which was much harder, was that for you, it was a British law, which is called Official Secrets Act. You cannot store any Kenyan data outside the borders. So I went for special permission that we be allowed to have this on the cloud somewhere in California. And to my surprise, that was approved. That also changed the landscape because young people began to use the data to develop applications in health, to develop applications in agriculture and other places. Government has a lot of data. And if you need local applications, that is what you need, because in our policy, we had intended to allow young people to develop local content, to develop local applications. And that's what happened. Then the early outcomes, you can see them here. Several innovations, several incubations were created in universities, innovation hubs all over the place. Several mobile applications were commercialized. Actually, several. Some are used here now, like iCow and stuff. Digitalization of public sector. This surprised us. Actually, Victor was leading the process. We digitized the banking hall for the lands ministry, and the revenue moved from 800 million to 9 billion in 6 months. So meaning that we could actually lower the tax rates by simply becoming more efficient. And that's what happened. Today, we have more than 200 services online that you can apply for your passport, even at midnight, and pay for it. It used to take 3 months. You go pick the form, go fill it and bring it back, and someone says it's okay. This is what we call that ICT would create greater efficiencies than before. Then improved M-Shamba, for example, improved agricultural productivity. And then global research institutions began to invest in Kenya. We brought IBM, Philips brought their research labs, Microsoft has brought their research labs to Nairobi. And all this is helping to build local capacities. Then impact from the broadband use soared. I can't even tell you how much we use today, but we have 5 undersea cables and nobody's complaining. In business terms, it means they're making money. We don't know how much they're making, but they're making good money. So it's viable. That what we did was the right decision. New applications, mobile applications, for example, M-Pesa, which has totally changed. When you talk about financial inclusivity, we now can be able to see this with so many applications, people getting non-collateralized loans. So the impact has not been fully assessed, that we're still looking at it. Then the number of Kenyans in the social media saw it. Of course, this is very painful also when you have too many people on social media. But soon you're going to see with the new technologies, it's going to be easy to identify fake news or fake media. So I'm moving quickly. Now we are in transition again. Of course, Africans missed the first industrial revolution, the second. We were about to miss the third industrial revolution. Now we're into the fourth industrial revolution. We can actually leapfrog. We can leapfrog and take advantage of these changes. We are beginning from the same slate. Look, I'm saying this because most of these technologies, which will drive the fourth industrial revolution, big data, Internet of Things, robotics. I work sometimes with a young lady from Ethiopia who set up in Kenya, small organization, Grow Intelligence, where you can predict painful patterns, you can understand how productivity can be improved in certain places. This is what we need in order to have food security. We don't need to import a lot of food. Africa is importing almost 40 billion worth of food. Africa has got 60% of the most arable land. We should not be doing that. By 2025, it's anticipated that we'll be importing around 110 billion. We could utilize the land, create jobs for the young people with these new technologies. In Nairobi, we have, well, we can talk. In Nairobi, we have some small companies that have set up using all these technologies, and they are able to advance credit and be able to, they do a credit score mechanism. This is a company called Twiga Food. You can go online and see. They have leveraged emerging technologies to create solutions that are impactful to farmers in the rural areas. But I wanted to show you that, well, internet is no longer very sexy, but we brought mobility. Now next is blockchain, which gives us a lot more opportunities at the moment to begin to think in that space. And it doesn't stop Ethiopia from collapsing several years like we went through to just 2 to 3 years, and you are big players across the world. There was this last presentation, which I don't want to read, and I allow you to just look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ndemo. It's always fascinating to hear what you say. I don't know how many times I have heard your presentation. I have been, at your presentations, and every time it's always fascinating. And Kenya is also a very fascinating country. So many things have happened in the telecom, in the internet sector in the last few years. In fact, it was not just by chance that we have so many Kenyans. We invited many of them purposefully because this is a neighbor from which we can learn a lot. Kenya has done a lot of things and a lot of things that we should be jealous about. And I hope that you are going to meet them. Professor Ndemo mentioned their names. Victor there, Alice, Michuki. Please take some time to take as much as possible from their brains, because it can save you a lot of time. And I really like what he said about leapfrogging. What I liked about Kenya was that they didn't say, well, we are very far behind. We will remain far behind. In fact, they aimed very high. And in some areas, they become leaders, like in the area of M-Pesa. And I think this is a spirit that we should have in Ethiopia, that we should take from our neighbors. Yes, we are behind in some areas, but ICT and internet in particular gives us the opportunity to leapfrog and become among leaders. And I think this should be the spirit that we should use in this conference. Now I would like to invite again Andrew. I don't think I need to introduce him again. Andrew can give us the perspective, the technical perspective, what makes the internet, a tool that, can let us innovate. What is interesting about the internet is that it is surprising. Why is it so surprising? And what makes it as such? So Andrew, please come and tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Dawit. I sometimes think that I have a weird job because, I worked in the trenches of a lot of stuff on the internet. I worked on deploying things directly for a long time. And now, because I'm the CEO of the Internet Society, I'm not allowed to know anything in particular.
I have all the staff, and they all know particular things, and I'm really kind of out of touch with things that I was used to being a really, hands-on expert about. And this sometimes frustrates me, but on other times it gives me an opportunity to see a picture of an arc of the way that the internet is developing and so on. And Ethiopia is at this moment, such an exciting moment in its history, where there is this enormous opportunity. So we just spoke a couple of times, Michuki mentioned it, and we just mentioned it as well, this idea of leapfrogging. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think it is a real opportunity. When I was speaking earlier this morning, I was talking a little bit about how the history of the internet developed, and I was trying to set the table for the way the rest of this meeting would go, that there were these two critical things that made the internet an important and valuable contributor to the way people could use it. And one of them was this feature of the network that it isn't that smart. The idea is the network stays out of the way, pieces out at the edge can be the intelligence in the system. And the reason for that was an insight that some people discovered about how the most valuable applications work, because the application is close to the person who's using it, and so the application knows what is needed. And the second piece that was a consequence of that, really, is that because the network doesn't have a lot of controls built into it, it means that you can do these innovations, and new innovations can come along, new things can come along, and they can be picked up and you can just deploy them, and you don't have to worry about a long deployment cycle. So those are two critical pieces that I think ought to focus our minds on what is it that we need from the development of the network here in Ethiopia. And I think that part of the answer to that is another piece that came from that history, and that was the tendency of the internet to depend on voluntary collaboration using open standards. And the reason this was so important, the reason it was necessary, is because if you have a number of different networks and they're supposed to collaborate with one another, there are really only two ways you can do that. One way is you can build an expensive and bureaucratic and extremely slow mechanism to introduce everybody to one another. And that is the traditional way that we used to build different kinds of networks. Different kinds of networks were built using this mechanism that really depended on a lot of lawyers. But there's another way to do it, and it's the way the internet selected. And that is to set a bunch of rules. We call them protocols. You set those rules in advance, and if you follow the rules and I follow the rules, even if we don't know each other, our stuff will work together because we're following the same set of rules. And this means that you can develop new things very quickly. You can develop these things quickly, and also you can develop these things in a way that allows them to evolve and change. So these features, the open network built of these kinds of protocols, the network that doesn't get in the way, that is neutral and allows innovation without the network being in control of it all, these are critical features for why the internet took off, why it seems to have supplanted all kinds of other network technologies. At the Internet Society, we like to call this the internet way of networking. It's a central piece of the kinds of things that we work on. We try to pay attention to those sorts of things and to influence them positively. But you might be asking yourself, why is this guy from Canada up there talking about all of this? We're here to talk about the internet in Ethiopia. And I want to try to convince you that this is a choice that Ethiopia gets to make right now. There are really a couple of models going on right now about network development. One is the internet way of networking that I just described. And then there are a bunch of alternative network development approaches, but one in particular that a number of people are trying to promote. Now, they always call this an alternative internet, but I like to call it the pretender net, because it doesn't really give you the advantages of the network of networks. It doesn't really give you the advantages of the internet way of networking. And I want to convince you that the internet way is a better way. Now, as I said earlier, it's an exciting time for the development of the internet in Ethiopia. Historically, Ethiopia had low internet penetration rates. But right now, you're undertaking a number of reforms to the telecommunications environment here. And those reforms, when they've been tried elsewhere, we just heard about how they have been tried elsewhere, and they have resulted in a boom in communication use. Think about going from a 16 kilobit line. Many of you are too young, I think, to know what a 16 kilobit line is. It's so slow. But those of us who have been around for a number of years, we remember those terrible days, and we assure you that it's a bad idea. And so it's this enormous opportunity to build new infrastructure without having to go through all of that terror, without having to, build many layers of different NATs and all the rest of it in order to get around the limitations of IPv4. As Michuki was saying earlier, you can just deploy IPv6 from the get-go and deliver a network that is much better. You don't have to develop workarounds for outdated systems that you have, like we have to do all of the time in Canada. But all of this is technical benefits. Technical benefits are not the real story here. Technical benefits would not be enough to make enough difference. The open network, the network of open protocols, the network that doesn't try to control what you can do, the network that permits innovation, those are all factors that are really important. They're influences in the way the internet developed. But they're technical facts. That's what made it possible for the internet to grow. But what made the internet really grow, what made it take off, it was humans. Humans were the thing that made it really go. It was the desire of people to make their lives better, to work together to solve the problems that they had. And in that way, the internet is a profoundly human technology. This is a country with a young population, just looking around this room. It's nice to be in a country with a young population. I'm from North America, right? Everybody's getting old. You think you laugh, but it's true. So what we see here is a population that can work on these technologies and then enjoy the benefits of those local developments for many years. There's another advantage that Ethiopia has. You have a large population. It's a large population. It's pretty diverse. There are a lot of languages here. But the many languages have this nifty feature. They're written, many of them are written in a script that is not widely shared around the rest of the world. They're written in a local writing system. Now, this makes a fantastic opportunity for development of local technology. When you have a large population of speakers of a language who are mostly not found elsewhere, that population gets well served by local providers. The local providers have an incentive to work on those things, to develop the systems. And what we'll see, I think, people developing systems that deliver services to people in their local tongue and in their local script. At the same time, because the internet is a global resource, Ethiopians will get access to the global networks, to the global markets, to the global source of information. And so you get to build out your network according to the best current practices. You can use all the best techniques, the best things that everybody in the world knows how to do. Your population can grow and thrive. Show everybody what a prosperous Ethiopia can be. But this is the promise that the internet offers if it is deployed wisely. Now, look, I'm the president and CEO of the Internet Society. My enthusiasm about the internet can get away from me. And we all know that the internet presents some challenges. I worked, back in the 1990s, I worked on some internet access projects in Canada. And in those days, nobody ever asked whether this was such a good idea. We would just deploy it. The internet was all opportunity. What could possibly go wrong? Well, we learned that sometimes things go wrong. Now, again, this is a profoundly human technology, the internet. Like humans, it offers enormous good to the world. It can help information flow so that someone far from a market can know what the prices are or where demand is rising. It can bring education to remote places. Canada is a very rural country. A lot of Canada is very far from the cities. We're only 35 million people or so spread across this enormous landmass, and most of the landmass is not heavily populated. And so small villages have used the internet in order to not send their kids to school thousands of kilometers away. Instead, they're using the internet to provide the education locally. It allows people to share discoveries at great distances. We wouldn't have some of the current scientific developments that we have if it weren't for the internet and the ability of people to share their discoveries across very long distances. It can bring specialist medical care from concentration of a population to rural places. Everybody doesn't have to travel so much in order to do that. It can speed information flow around dense urban areas so that vehicular traffic can go down, pollution goes down. But of course, the other thing about the internet is it can bring us together when we're separated by vast distances. When I was growing up, the kind of video conferencing that we can use today was a total science fiction dream. And now we do it all the time. That's in fact how the internet the internet society works most of the time. I don't see my colleagues face to face most days. Most days I see them on a video screen, but we collaborate effectively. So great, it brings all these benefits. But like humans, the internet can bring some of the worst in humans as well. As long as there have been humans, there have been thieves, there have been liars, there have been people committing fraud. For as long as there have been governments, there have been people trying to steal power. These are big social problems. They're part of humanity. But for the plots and schemes of villains, the internet is just another tool, something that they'll use in order to achieve their ends. What's worse, the internet doesn't give us the kinds of clues that, real life does. If you go into a risky or an unfamiliar neighborhood, you keep your wits about you. You feel it, you're more alert. When you're dealing in an unfamiliar shop, or dealing with a stranger in a commercial transaction, or you're dealing with somebody who doesn't quite speak your language, you take care not to be taken advantage of. Keep your hand on your wallet. The internet doesn't give us these clues. On the internet, it's easy to pretend to be someone else. You can take advantage of inadequate security practices that were designed for a world where the danger is really there in the immediate vicinity of you. On the internet, basically everyone is nearby, and they can take advantage of those things. And they do take advantage of those things. We see it. And so for a lot of people, for many of us, the internet feels like a threat. And to counter this, some people argue for a different vision of the network, a network that is centrally managed and has a lot of controls built into the network itself. Now, they still call this the internet, but it isn't the real network of networks. This is the pretender net. The idea is that the controls need to be placed in some central authority, whether it be governments or the network authority, the network operators, somebody, it doesn't really matter. It's a central place. And the idea is that peace, order, and the rule of law is maintained because of that central control. It's understandable. I'm not pretending that there are no problems on the internet, and none of us wants a technology that is too dangerous for humans to use. But I want you to think a little bit about what these proposals look like. And I'm hoping that the rest of this conference and then the follow-on work will lead us to better solutions. Because the proposals that are on the table sometimes, I think, are quite bad. For instance, to solve the urgent social problems of terrorism and child abuse online, there is a technical fix proposal floating around that has gained a lot of traction with certain governments, and it requires every network to use filters developed and deployed by a few very large social media companies. Now, these proposals might work, although I think they probably will not. But they will certainly cement the technical and power advantages of the large companies that we're talking about. It will make it very hard to evolve the internet in various places, and it will also make it very hard for new players to enter the market. Many countries, including many developing countries, embrace network development as large turnkey projects. You see these all the time. You build everything at once, you get one large vendor or maybe a handful of them, and they promise to manage everything for you for the rest of time. Now, the idea is usually that these proposals will get the network developed and delivered faster than a more piecemeal approach, building a little bit at a time. The promises are very often not confirmed by experience. You get these very large projects, they don't really deliver things faster anyway. The other thing about it is that these very large turnkey projects are often very, very expensive. Also, very often, these very large projects don't do very much for domestic skills development. What you end up with, really, is an expensive network that you can't operate yourself. It should not be too surprising to anyone that projects like that sound uncomfortably like colonial infrastructure projects of the past. To solve problems of safety and security, various policymakers have proposed widespread internet surveillance and weak encryption that is supposed to be breakable only by the authorities and immune to other attacks. Vendors see this opportunity and they will sell you all day long everything that you ever could possibly want in order to implement this technology. The problem is none of that stuff works. They don't work because this is a desire that cannot be satisfied. What really happens is these systems undermine the safety and security of everyone. They even undermine the security of the authorities' own communications networks. To solve the issues of fake news and election interference, various people have suggested reinventing the internet routing infrastructure. Usually this is to make it depend entirely on national borders rather than allowing connectivity to work across borders. Or else people propose impossibly hard identity requirements on everything that gets posted online. And sometimes both of these proposals come at once. Now, there's very little reason to believe that these proposals will actually solve the problems of fake news or election interference, because people have been committing fake news and election interference long before the internet was a gleam in anyone's eye. What they will do is make sure that the systems that we get will be more expensive and less reliable than the internet. And that would be a tragedy. What we humans need to do is to use the internet, this great tool for our collective betterment. We need to use it for the good of all. That means we need to use the internet way of networking to make the internet safe for us all, without losing the advantages of the open, voluntary, general purpose network that lets new ideas and new opportunities flourish. Local communities should be able to work on problems that affect them most pressingly, while reaching out to draw on the resources of the whole world. This is the network that Ethiopians should have if you want it. One that is open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy. But this is also the network that Ethiopia can make. You have the natural advantages that I mentioned before, and the internet way of networking enlists us all in making the internet better. Ethiopia may want the internet to grow here. The Internet Society is here very proudly, and with our new and energetic chapter, shout out to the chapter again. We want to help, but we want your help too, because the internet needs Ethiopia. We need your creativity. We need the observations that you can make, that you can offer in order to make the internet of the future. That's because the internet is for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. I think he gave us a lot of food for thought for the next few days. I liked a few things that he said. I like that he said the internet is mainly human. And I would like to share a story from a long time ago. When, I think in Africa, the first country to be connected was in 1993. Nishal, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think South Africa was connected in 1993. And then, all those big development organizations came with the idea we have to connect Africa. And most of them came with lots of money, and the money was for equipment, big routers, big servers, etc. And the only organization, I can correct me if I'm wrong, that focused on people was the Internet Society back then. And the biggest, I think, impact was made because it invested on people. And I think in Ethiopia, what will make the difference is not the equipment. We might buy the latest router, the latest servers, but as long as we don't have people who understand the internet and who can really challenge even the government when it decides something, then I think we are not going to have the internet that we want for the future. So I think we have to be ready to understand what the internet is. It's complex. There's no simple solution. As Andrew said, there are many people who are trying to do good things with the internet, and there are people who are trying to do bad things with it. And we have to find solutions to avoid that those bad things don't destroy our country. But we shouldn't throw everything. We have to be intelligent, and it requires everybody's intelligence so that we have an internet that really helps us have a country that is developed as we want it to be in the coming years. So I think our speakers have been respectful of time, so it gives us some time for questions and answers. So please ask questions, give comments, but introduce yourself, your name, your organization, and try to be as brief as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Mohammed Ibrahim from Mogadishu, next door, Somalia. But currently, I actually am based in Melbourne, so I have to fly 20 hours to get here. So a couple of questions and maybe one comment. I enjoyed both speakers' notes, and I would like to just mention a few things. And first of all, I want to thank Ndemo for amazing stuff. And I want to welcome also the Ethiopian Internet Society. We've been there 10 years ago. Somalia's Internet Society chapter is actually 11 years old. So we've been there, so it's interesting. But seriously, what I really want to mention here is, Professor Ndemo, yes, we came a long way, but we still got a long way to go. And I want to mention just a couple of things. Both of you used the word leapfrogging. In Mogadishu, we have another word which is similar, but in Somali, if it's loosely translated into English, it becomes leap tigering. In other words, we don't frog, we actually want to do a tiger. We want to jump higher. But anyway, here is my comment. Let me just quickly jump into the example of M-Pesa. Almost a decade, we looked at M-Pesa amazing product. This question, how do we make M-Pesa even better? In other words, M-Pesa is now helping the velocity of money. In other words, it's circulation of money. We can move money quickly in Kenya and probably even in the region, but we're not saving. So how can we make M-Pesa a product that not only allows me to transfer my few shillings from one person to the other, but also save? And that would be, I think, the next challenge. And if we can do that, then M-Pesa can become a product that other countries can use. Now, the other comment you use in social media, yes, we've got the same issues in Somalia also about social media, a big challenge for all of us. Here's the question: how do we monetize social media? How do we actually change, instead of our young people using social media and paying, we don't realize this, but actually we pay Facebook and Google by using their products. But how do we change that? So our young people, as you noticed, Mr. My brain is going. I have to, sorry. Sullivan, yes. As you mentioned, a lot of young people here, but most of our young people use the social media. But how do we monetize? How do we change it so that we can actually make money out of social media? And lastly, my comment on using the internet in a more productive way. We all use, looking from government's perspective, Gmail and Hotmail and what have you. 10 years ago, we were talking about how about creating AfriMail, so that African countries and the governments can use their own mail. So if we're talking about keeping data in our own country, that might be one way to start. Now, just very quickly, going back to Mr. Sullivan again, you mentioned something very, very important here about the move of the internet from the government side to the people, to the community, and that's where it belongs. And this is what we're pushing for a long time. Now, when I come to Addis, I visit two places. One is the Addis University. Another one is the African Union building. And I specifically look at two things. There are two plaques. One by someone from 64 at university, and I will encourage you all to go and see that. This was someone very important in my heart, passed away a long time ago, 1964. His name was Robert Kennedy. And he wrote few words on that plaque. I will encourage you to read. I won't repeat them here because it's worth paying the visit and reading that. But on the other hand, if you go to the African Union building, there's also another plaque that also talks about something else. And I want you to both read, compare, and I will leave my case there. Then you will know what this topic about moving the internet from government to people is all about now. Lastly, if you'll allow me, let me just mention about the fake news and elections and all this. The same challenges we have in Africa, specifically in Somalia as we go into an election. But I take your point. Very important that we should pay attention to fake news. And you were mentioning that fake news is not a new idea. I agree with you. It's not a new idea. It was happening all along. The difference we both know is the internet allows 3 S's: scope, scale, and speed. Now, we didn't have that problem before. Now we do. So how do we reconcile these two? And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mohammed. In fact, Mohammed was Minister of Communications of Somalia a few years back. That's the reason why I couldn't interrupt him. So I hope that the next speakers could take less time so that we can go for lunch quickly. I think let's have a few more people and then you can answer together so that we can be faster. Henriette.
Thanks, Dawit. Henriette Esterhuizen from African School on Internet Governance, Association for Progressive Communications, and currently chair of the Global Internet Governance Forum. I have a chance to speak later, so I'll comment on some of the really interesting input that I heard. I just want to put one question on the table. There's one thing I think that cannot be leapfrogged, and that's good governance, accountability, transparency, democracy. And it's not an easy thing to achieve. You know, I'm South African, and I'm old enough to have been part of the struggle against apartheid, part of the celebration of having a new democracy, but also part of disappointment is perhaps not the right word, but part of the generation that's realizing that democracy is not easy to retain, to grow, to develop. And so I think just from both of you, your reflections on that, particularly for Ethiopia, which is going through so many political and social and internet-related transitions, how can we, in the work that we do as internet people, keep that goal of continuously good, accountable, transparent, people-oriented governance on top of the agenda?
I think since you raised big issues, let's stop here and let's give Professor Ndemo and Andrew the opportunity to say something about them.
Thanks for the good questions that you've asked. I'm a teacher, so let me stand. The questions from Minister. Actually, M-Pesa has another set of other applications for savings. We have M-Shwari. It's also doing other areas. But what we should be looking at is what M-Pesa has inspired. Things like what Libra, Facebook's Libra, until we familiarize, if we begin to use solutions like M-Pesa, it becomes much easier to understand cryptocurrencies, which are coming like internet. We are in denial, but I think in 5 years, it will be past. I think we'll be talking about these cryptocurrencies. Even the US, which refused at the beginning, China, they're looking at stable currencies, which would work like M-Pesa. We are very lucky that we started ahead of these other countries. We don't have a problem. If today we had a dictator in Kenya and said there is no use of cash, I don't think any Kenyan would complain. That's how it is. That's everybody, practically everybody uses this, and there is a savings part of it. The other question is monetization of social security, social media. If you go to Nairobi today, women who have poultry farming with eggs, they are actually marketed through WhatsApp, sent to WhatsApp group, the other group sent to the other. There is monetization that is going on. If you look at crowdsourcing, I mean, where people come together, raise resources for a particular thing, it's all done through social media nowadays. There is lots of advertising on Facebook that is going on. I think we need to spread the message that you don't just use it for the purposes that we think it should be used for. We should be more creative and use it for other things and trying to monetize. There are many more solutions that I can go through, but it is being used in Africa. It's not just that we are using it to abuse one another, because that is what gets to be talked about. But there is much more that is happening. Fake media, I am not worried, and I would answer it with respect to the other questions on good governance, accountability. Being a person who teaches entrepreneurship, the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. This is actually an opportunity. I work with UNESCO on new innovations, and I've seen two very good applications that you can use to validate the news that you're getting. They go back and look at other news to be able to validate, meaning that there are people working somewhere with sleepless nights to come up with a solution for this. We should not be crying here that fake media is killing us. We should actually be looking at how do we provide an African solutions to fake media? How can we validate it and quickly, as fast as it moves out, how can we also come as fast to say that this is false, these are the facts, about this. Artificial intelligence is helping us in that space. And I think we should look at how do we take it forward, not just to complain, but leverage that. I think myself that these issues Africa is suffering from on good governance, accountability, transparency, we could sort them out. We could sort them out because I'll give you an example. In 2017, we had elections in Kenya. And in these elections, to run for governor, you had to have a college degree, you had to have a clean record from criminal records in the government, you had all these kinds of requirements. And what has happened is that, what happened then is that most politicians took money and they bought certificates from universities. And they bought the criminal, they got a clean criminal record. And when media followed, they found that these people didn't quite get degrees. So the questions they were being asked, name 2 classmates you had. They couldn't name any classmate. But because of that, the Electoral Commission now is going to use blockchain. And this is what we are talking about, digitization of most of the records that we have. Meaning that the universities would have digitized records, and the Kenyan government has built an identity which we call Huduma number. Huduma number would work on a blockchain. We have done, this report is online, you can go look at it, meaning that if you came today to register to go run for elections, the official would ask you to give them permission, because we have a data protection law, to access their records from various sources, meaning that in one split second, they will tell you you are a criminal, you never went to university, and can't allow you to register because you don't qualify. So technology is going to help us deal with a lot of these issues. But the issue around democracy, democracy also isn't 100%, it has its faults, but it's actually the best system, as Winston Churchill said. We could work, the best performing countries in Africa, they're still working on democracy. Yeah. So the question is, but we should be thinking about it, and tech people have a responsibility to make democracy work, because it is those issues that I'm talking about transparency, about governance, which can be actually be sorted by matching technologies, and then we can see how we can deal with democracy. The problems that we have in Africa, and this is, you can go do your research. Well, Asia dealt with economic reforms first before they dealt with political reforms. They succeeded. In Africa, we are attempting to do political reforms and economic reforms at the same time. So sometimes we get confused here and there, but soon, I'm saying soon, you would find those who are focusing. Ethiopia, for example, has focused more on economic reforms, building the parks and other things. The economy, the GDP has grown so fast. Now, if they begin talking about political reforms, once they have understood how the economic reforms work, they will probably do better than most other countries. I've been coming to Ethiopia for many, many years, and I can show you the graph on what is happening. I don't know those visitors who have been coming here. Even Addis has changed over the past 5 years. Is it true or false? Where are you from? Even when I opened my window today, I saw one, I think probably the tallest building in Africa, isn't it? Yeah? These are signs of development. I think you are getting it right on economic reforms. I think you probably need to work on political reforms after you have understood how economic reforms goes forward. That is what that's my attempt.
I have this one here. Yeah, you can keep that. So I don't want to duplicate any of that, but I think, and I'm a failed academic, so I'm not going to stand up. There are a couple of things that I want to link together here, because I think that these questions actually merge in an interesting way. If we focus our attention on the things that have happened rather than use the things that have happened as a guide for what we should do in the future, we'll concentrate our attempts to develop things against stuff that is already deployed. And so I really like this point about figuring out how to use the systems as they are deployed and then use them in new and creative ways, because I think that is one of the things that the internet gives us, this opportunity to use tools in new and surprising ways. The people who created the internet and before that the ARPANET, many years ago, I am pretty sure did not imagine that one of the main things it was going to be used for was distributing cat videos so we could all watch one another's pets. That was, not the main thing that people were interested in, and yet that seems to drive a lot of network traffic. And I think that that's an important fact about this. Now, what does that have to do with, making sure that that development happens locally, or that we do something about fake news or whatever? What it tells us is that the development of the fundamentals of the infrastructure are something that we need to ensure can continue to happen regardless of the social issues that are part of that discussion. To put this another way, a lot of the time what we see is a development that is associated with the deployment of a new technology. And then we go after the technology as opposed to the social issue. And then we concentrate on the technology. So for instance, I've noticed on many occasions, people like to talk about internet governance, and then all they do is they talk about the internet part of that. And they don't spend the time talking about the governance part of it. But the governance part of it is actually the social problem, right? There's not a technical solution to most of these issues. There's not really a technical solution to the fact that a large number of the social media companies all inhabit a space within a few kilometers of one another in California. That's where they got founded, that's where they got started, and the really big ones are all there. And if the concern is how do we keep people from using that one as opposed to using one that is more locally developed and so on, that's chasing the wrong part of the problem, because what that is a chase of the technical side of it. And what you need instead is to address the social side of it while protecting the technology from the social interference, from it being damaged. And so what that suggests is that the way to do this is to develop the new applications that are the next killer applications that give us the advantages that we want. And because we're now in a period where we are much more concerned about a number of the social consequences of the internet, the thing to do is to sort of tease apart which of these things are just social problems that are not actually going to be solved by the technology. Which of these are technical problems that need to be addressed in a technical front, and which of these live at the intersection of these places? Because the ones that live at the intersection of the technology and the society are the ones where there really are new killer applications to be developed. And those killer applications can be developed right here. They can be developed here by people who want to do those kinds of things because they're trying to address those problems. And as I was mentioning in the remarks that I made, it's particularly interesting here in Ethiopia because you have a writing system that is not widely shared in the rest of the world, you have a ready-made audience for an application that is not likely to be developed by anybody else. But that's a great way to bootstrap applications, right? Because you start with a well-defined audience, and then you gradually say, oh, I see, I can extend this to this audience or that audience or the next one. And what that means is it produces a virtuous circle in which we can develop new applications that address many of these issues. They're not going to solve the social aspects of this, but they might, for instance, address some of the speed or the scope of, for instance, fake news or other kinds of issues, because they give the clues necessary, they're missing from the way that the internet has developed so far. So that is the way that I think there's a hopeful future for this.
Thank you, Ndemo, Andrew. I think this was very important because what happened, I think what happens very often all over the world and especially in Ethiopia, that whenever there is a problem, we panic. We say, this is a bad technology. But I think that is true for any technology. And in fact, more than any other technology, the internet has problems, but it also comes with opportunities to solve those problems, as you have rightly said. So I think, especially for the young audience here, you shouldn't fear those problems. You should use it to find, to create new applications, to create, wealth out of it rather than to fear it. And with regards to, we are in a period of transition. Yes, we are, democracy creates its own unknown things, and the internet exacerbates that. But I think we really have to face the problem in front, and as long as we work hard, we will find solutions, and I think we can do it. Normally, I think we are over, it's 12:33, but I still want some people to ask questions in Amharic to test whether the interpreters are doing their job. So, can you please take your, So, 2 short questions in Amharic. በአማርኛ ሁለት አጫጭር ጥያቄዎች። እሺ ዛጋ ወንድሜ።
አመሰግናለሁ። ጥያቄዎቼ ሁለት ናቸው እንደተቀመጡት። የመጀመሪያው ጥያቄ ፐብሊክ ፕራይቬት ፓርትነርሺፕ ላይ በተለይ የኬንያ ኤክስፒሪየንስ ምን እንደሚመስል የተወሰነ ብሪፍ ቢደረግ የሚላለኝ። ሁለተኛው የኢንተርኔት ቴክኖሎጂው እንደ ፕላትፎርም ብዙ ኦፖርቹኒቲ ያመጣል ብለናል። ግን ለምሳሌ አሁን ኢትዮጵያ ነባራዊ ሁኔታውን ብናይ ሬዲነሱ ምን ይመስላል የሚለው ላይ ለምሳሌ ምን ያክሉ ሶሳይቲ በተለይ ኢንክሉሲቭ መሆን የሚገባው በጀንደር ሊሆን ይችላል፣ በቴክኒካል ኖሌጅ አይሲቲውን በመጠቀም ሊሆን ይችላል። ከዚህ ጋር በመገናኘት እንደዚህ አይነት የኮሚኒቲዎችን ወይም የኤሪያዎች ላይ ቢዝነሶች እንዴት ነው ክሬት ሊደረጉ የሚችሉት? ኮንቬንሽናል የሆነው የቴክኖሎጂ ሬቨኑ ክሬት የሚያደርግበት እዛ ቦታ ላይ በዛው አይነት ሜካኒዝም ሬቨኑ ክሬት ሊያደርግ ይችላል ወይ የሚለውን አብረው እንዲያነሱ ነው። አመሰግናለሁ።
ኦኬ፣ ስምህን የተናገርክ አይመስለኝም።
ኦኬ፣ አንዱዓለም እባላለሁ ከወልዲያ ዩኒቨርሲቲ። ኦኬ፣
አመሰግናለሁ። እቺ የመጨረሻዋን ምናልባት ኢትዮጵያን የሚመለከተውን እኔ ለመመለስ ሞክራለሁ፣ ሌሎቹን እሱ ይመልሳሉ። እሺ፣ ከጀርባ
እሺ፣ አመሰግናለሁ። መላኩ እባላለሁ ከአዲስ አበባ ዩኒቨርሲቲ። ጥያቄው መጀመሪያው ኢንተርኔት ኦፍ ቲንግስ አሁን ሀፕን እያደረገ ነው እና ብዙ ፍራቻው ምንድነው ሴኩሪቲ ኢንተርኔት ኦፍ ቲንግስ የሚያመርቱ ወይም ዲቫይሶችን የሚያመርቱ አካላት ሴኪዩርድ አይደሉም እና ኤክስፖዝ ያደርጋል ሰዎችን የሚል ነው እና ኢንተርኔት ሶሳይቲ በዚህ አካባቢ ምን ይሰራል? በተለይ ከተለያዩ ድርጅቶች ጋር አብሮ ምን አይነት ስራ ይሰራል የሚል ነው። ሁለተኛው የኢትዮጵያ ቴሌኮም ብዙ ጊዜ ይሄ ኢንተርኔት ስፔስ ያው ከቴሌኮም ዴቨሎፕመንት ጋር የተገናኘ ነው። የኢትዮጵያ መንግስት በብዛት ምክንያት የሚሰጠው የነበረው ሩራል ኤሪያው ላይ ልማት አይመጣም ፕራይቬታይዝ ቢደረግ፣ ስለዚህ መንግስት የሰበሰበውን ገንዘብ መልሶ ወደ ገጠራማው አካባቢ ኢንቨስት አደርጋለሁ ብሎ ስለሚያስብ ነው እና ብዙ ቴሌኮም ካምፓኒ ማቋቋም ለኢንተርኔት እድገት ኢትዮጵያ መንግስት ጀስቲፋይ ሲያደርግበት የቆየውን ያፈርሳል ወይስ ብዙ አሁን ኬንያኖች ያገኛለው የተለያየ ቦታ ላይ ሌላም አፍሪካ ሀገሮች ብዙ ቴሌኮም ካምፓኒ መምጣቱ ለሀገራቱ ብዙም ጥቅም አይሰጥም፣ ብዙ ከዌስት አካባቢ የሚመጡ ካምፓኒዎች ጥቅም ለማጋበስ ካልሆነ በስተቀር የሚል ምክንያት ይሰጣሉ። ይህን እንዴት ይመለከቱታል የሚል ነው። አመሰግናለሁ።
አመሰግናለሁ። እንደመስለኝ ለነሱ እድል ብሰጥና ኢትዮጵያ ነው የሚመለከት ያለውን ምናልባት እኔ ለመመለስ ሞክራለሁ። ፕሮፌሰር እንደሞ
These are actually very good questions. I didn't have time to explain how the public-private partnerships helped us to build the first undersea cable. The reason why we thought of PPP is because government has budgets. And usually when you get your budget, if it is not enough, you don't implement. And so we said we can work with the private sector to lay the cable. So what the government did, they spent a little money what was in the budget to do the surveys where the cable was going to go through, and they came back to telco companies and said, it's going to cost us $100 million. We need everybody to invest here. So we got 15 local investors to buy into the cable. Because the cable has got several strands, each would either take dark fiber or get capacity from the cable itself. So we got the two big ones. They took bigger share, Safaricom and Telcom, and then the smaller ones took 5%, 5%. Then we also asked our neighboring countries who would want to invest. In fact, a young Ethiopian came and invested 5% in that cable. And all he needed is that we guaranteed him that we would bring the cable to the border, the terrestrial cable to the border. And because of this, we built the undersea cable in record time, 2 years, because private sector can spend money much more easily than the government, which has the budgetary constraints. Then there are several other areas where we didn't have the resources, but created an enabling environment for the private sector to invest with government and actually do the project much faster than waiting for either the World Bank or some donors to support. And that worked very well. So even most of the donor agencies encouraged that we begin to build this capacity. There is a lot of resources within the country. Right now, we're trying to work on venture capital, local people funding small enterprises that are coming up because government cannot always find the money. On internet, I think we need to have bigger sessions to understand the future business models, Those who are in social media, they don't pay to use it. WhatsApp, you don't pay to make your calls, but they make money in whatever model that they have deployed. The scariest thing is that unless we begin to understand the changing business models because of internet, we may even suffer with our telco companies. For example, if you look at this, the competition in 5G, whereas China went ahead and provided a terrestrial solution, almost 7 American companies are fighting to get 5G from satellite. And it's very easy for them to have a business model that they are not charging anybody, meaning you have super high speed here without paying for it. And it's very easy to say, for example, those who are streaming to pay for it, a completely new business model. So we must begin in our business schools or in meetings like this to also anticipate what businesses we will do and what business models that we are going to use. We are used to the old barter system, give me that, I give you this, which is dying because Google makes a lot of money. They don't charge you much to do that unless you go to some level where you need to pay. So we must begin to talk about the business models. Which other ways we can create money out of internet? Africa has more than 2,000 languages. 2,000 languages. English is a very difficult language, a completely difficult language. When you speak in Africa about productivity, and the politicians sometimes say, I'm going to help you improve productivity. People think they are going to produce more children because there is no equivalent of the term productivity in African languages. Yeah? So now we have a chance in our lifetime that we can use machine learning to develop, to process natural languages. There's a young lady from South Africa. We were supposed to be in Paris next week to present to her. She has developed a solution for natural language processing. You should be talking Amharic, and I understand you in Swahili without a problem. Yeah, without a problem. Now we have to go to France and understand France before we understand, and we are neighbors. And we are neighbors just here. So there is an opportunity, as Andrew said, in actually leveraging these languages. We should never stay idle such that somebody comes from the US to translate Amharic into a language that can be understood by people who are non-Amharic. That's an opportunity. These are the questions we should ask. Can we understand this machine learning better? How do we make our languages understood by others? I've always wanted to understand your written language. What do you call it? What? Yeah? The script. Ethiopic. I've always wanted to. So if you had a school here 1 week, I'll come from Kenya here to pay you and actually learn it because it's very complex. It's not, we were colonized and we went 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D, which everybody sees, you know? So, but you can say things which are very complex. There's a lot more now, especially as we move to the 4th industrial revolution, that Africa should work up, leverage those technologies to create solutions that nobody else can create from any other part of the world. They will be created if you stay idle.
Thank you, Professor Ndemo. Thank you for explaining the meaning of productivity. I think you are contributing to curbing the population growth of Ethiopia because I think we understood it wrongly. Andrew?
Thank you. So very quickly on the, because I'm aware that I'm standing between you and lunch, and that's never a good place to be. But there were 2 questions that were both about the role of ISOC, of the Internet Society, in in addressing, on the one hand, sort of security issues, and on the other hand, hooking up rural areas because of blocks in getting infrastructure built. And the short answer about the Internet Society's role in both of these cases is that we try to be an enabler and a collaborator. I like to say sometimes that we're the Internet Society, not the Internet in charge people. We don't run stuff. We try to help other people build their societies and build their capabilities up. And so in the case of the security issues, the things that we try to do is to bring attention, on the one hand, to the sort of poor practices that we sometimes see people using, and on the other hand, we try to bring attention to some of the poor ideas that people have in response to that. We're trying to make sure that people don't solve the problem with a cure that is much worse than the disease, which seems to be one of the ways that people are starting to try to solve these things. Similarly, in rural access issues, we try to help we try to help communities and governments both with the kind of regulatory responses that they have and with the ability to develop the connectivity themselves. So there are a lot of different solutions to connectivity in rural places, and the worst one is the one that people seem to reach for a lot, is to just use old technology because that's cheaper. And that's really the worst answer. Most of the time, the technologies that are older have a number of limitations on them, which is why they didn't get deployed widely in the first place. So, shipping the out-of-date stuff onto people who don't have connectivity because of that is probably a bad idea. And so instead, we find that when we talk to people, we can talk to them about community network approaches, we can talk to people about white space approaches, we can talk to people about the ways that different cables can be used, the way that cable can be run that is sometimes more inexpensive, the way hybrid systems can be useful, the way low Earth orbit satellites can be useful. There's a whole mix of these things. And typically what happens when you talk to people about this, they give you the solution that they want. And the reason they want that solution is because most of the time it's one that they have to sell you. And so what the Internet Society can be here is a group that understands the various possibilities and can help work through what's the right solution for this kind of condition or the right solution for that kind of condition. And when we're dealing with governments, one of the things we try to spend a lot of time on is to try to show them that really one size doesn't fit all. And the right answer is to try to develop the correct framework so that the framework moves and can stretch or contract in order to deal with the different kinds of approaches. So that's really what the Internet Society's job is in these cases. Not so much to do things for people, but rather to enable people to do things themselves.
I'm going to use Amharic, so if you want to use your headset. I think that guy ያለው ወንድሜ ረሳሁት ስምህን የጠየቀው ጥያቄ አንደኛው ኢትዮጵያ ዝግጁ ነን ወይ ለእንደዚህ አይነት ነገሮች ነው መሰለኝ። እንግዲህ በደንብ ከገባኝ እርግጥ ነው ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ አንዳንዱ ነገር ላይ ገና ትንሽ ራሳችንን ምንድነው አንዳንድ ነገሮች ላይ መማር ይኖርብናል። አንዳንድ የሚቀሩን ዕውቀቶች ይኖሩ ይሆናል። ስለ ኢንፍራስትራክቸሩ ምናምን ብዙ ተናግረናል። ግን ራሳችን እንደ ህዝብ ዝግጁ ነን ወይ ለሚለው ትንሽ ይቀራናል። ነገር ግን ጥሩነቱ ኢንተርኔት በጣም ይለዋወጣል። ስለሚለዋወጥ የድሮውን ብዙ ማወቅ የለበትም። የወደፊቱን አሁን ያለበትን ማወቅ ይኖርብናል። ስለዚህ ወደ ኋላ ይሆንውን በአጭር ጊዜ ውስጥ ልንደርስባቸው እንችላለን። ስለዚህ እኔ አያስፈራኝ። ዋናው ግን መጀመር ነው። እርግጥ ምንም ነገር ሳንሰራ ሌላው ላይ እንደርሳለን ልንል አንችልም። ግን ከጀመርን በተለይ በአሁኑ ጊዜ ሁሉም ነገር ሁሉም ዕውቀት ኢንተርኔት ላይ አለ ማለት ይቻላል። ድሮ አስታውሳለሁኝ ዶክተር ሊሻንን አይቼዋለሁ መሰለኝ ስለ ኢንተርኔት ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ለማስገባት ብሪንጊንግ ኢንተርኔት ቱ ኢትዮጵያ የሚባል ገና ኢንተርኔት በሌለበት ጊዜ አቋቁመን እንዴት ነው ኢንተርኔትን ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ የምናስገባው ብለን ስንል ቀላሉ ነገር ዛሬ በጣም ሲምፕል የሚሆነው ቴክኖሎጂ እንዴት ነው የሚሰራው የሚለውን ነገር ከየት ነው የምናገኘው? ምክንያቱም ኢንተርኔት የለም ነበር። ስለዚህ ወራት ይፈልግብን ነበር ትንሿን ነገር ለማግኘት። አሁን ግን በጣም ኮምፕሊኬትድ የሆነውን ነገር ለማወቅ በጣም ቀላል ነው፣ ላይ መሄድ ነው። ስለዚህ ያ አያሰጋኝም። ዋናው ሁላችንም መነሳሳት አለብን። የዚህ ስብሰባ ዓላማ ይህን ተነሳሽነት እንትን ለማለት ነው። እንደገናም ቻፕተሩ ተቋቁሟል። የኢንተርኔት ሶሳይቲ ቻፕተር ለሁላችሁም መገናኛ እውቀት መግዣ ቦታ እንዲሆን ነው የምንፈልገው። ስለዚህ ኢንተርኔት ሶሳይቲ ቻፕተር ውስጥ ገብታችሁ ምናልባት የሚያስፈልገው ደረጃ ራሳችሁን ልታዳብሩ ትችላላችሁ ብያምናለሁ። ስለዚህ አመሰግናለሁ። በዚሁ እናቁምና ሌላ ብዙ አጋጣሚ ይኖረናል ዲስከስ ለማድረግ። ወደ ምሳ እንሂድ። አንድ 15 ደቂቃ ተነረፍድ አንቀርም፣ እንዲያውም ከዛ በላይ። ስለዚህ ያችን እንትን ብለን ከምሳ በኋላ መመለስ ያለብን 7 ሰዓት ተኩል ነው። 1 ሰዓት ይኖረናል። ምናልባት ትንሽ 45 ደቂቃ ብናደርገው ነው ቶሎ ሄደን እዚህ ከ45 እንመለስ። ስለዚህ በ7 ሰዓት ከ45 እዚህ ለመመለስ እንሞክር። አመሰግናለሁ።